All right, so today we're going to work on how to draw an eye. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so it's easier. So hopefully you guys all have a piece of paper and a pencil with you. I guess I'll start with just like the basics, okay? So when we're drawing an eye, a lot of times people try to draw eyes like, oh, somebody's coming into our Zoom late. It's Demontre. All right. So when people are trying to draw eyes, a lot of times they'll do things like this. They'll start with like a football shape, which that's not really right. Or they'll do an almond like this. No, that's wrong too. Some people won't even do those kinds of things. They'll do like cartoony eyes where they'll do like stuff like this, which is fine if you're doing a cartoon, but not if you're drawing a realistic eye, okay? So when you're drawing a realistic eye, let me go ahead and move my page up a little bit. I'm just gonna make sure I know where my projector, zoom in a little bit more. I'm gonna make sure I have enough space. So we'll go, I'm just gonna stay inside of this box so I make sure that you guys can all see my drawing. Okay, so I'm gonna draw an eye inside of this box. All right, so when you're drawing an eye, the general shape you wanna go with is actually more like this. It's kind of like a little bit of a smushed U on the top, like an umbrella, like that. And then on the bottom, it's like almost like an S, like it comes up a little bit, down, and then kind of up again, a little bit more like that. That's kind of more the traditional shape of an eye. Let me show you how it works, all right? So down here on my background, but the first thing I'm gonna do before I do anything else is I am gonna draw a circle, just real light. Remember, if you keep your elbow locked, you can draw a better circle. And so I made that super light. And the reason I even drew that is because a lot of people forget when they're drawing an eye, you're actually drawing an eye opening. You're not drawing an eye. An eye is a sphere. It's a ball that's inside your head. And you're only drawing the part that you can see, which is the part that's open to people. So your eye is usually it's about 3 times the size of what you can physically see, right? So you need to make sure that you keep that in mind because the sphere of the eyeball will help you decide how to shade it, okay? So now I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna go to the corner here of my circle or the side of my circle, and I'm gonna draw the corner of the eye. So I'm gonna kind of come up and over and then down. So that's gonna be the top part of my eye. So everyone draw that in there for a second. And keep everything really light with your pencil. We'll commit some lines in a little bit, but you wanna be able to erase everything as you go if you need to. So go ahead and draw that.
Are we doing it big?
Mine's about, I don't know, 5 by 7, maybe a little bigger than that. So I just have a camera zoomed in on it. It doesn't have to be super big. Like there's the tip of my pencil. There's my hand, you know, it's like the size of the palm of my hand. I would draw it big enough to add some detail, but you don't have to draw it so large that it's going to take a while. All right, so now I'm going to draw the bottom part. And I usually start in the same area, but I don't connect these 2 lines. I leave a little bit of a gap between them. You'll see why in a minute. I'm going to let the value connect those later. But first, I'm going to start here in the corner. And I'm actually going to start by going up first. Because this like little inside, I'll use my own eye as an example. Like the inside edge of your eye actually moves up for a second before it goes down. And then we'll come down like this. And this kind of comes over to the side before it loops back around. I think that is more traditionally the shape of somebody's eye. Now, the one thing that you have to remember, all these techniques that I teach you this week about facial proportions, they're all just generalities. They're principles that are usually true, but they're not always true. So if you're going to draw a person, the most important rule always is just look at the person that you're drawing or look at a reference and you'll actually get to see, because not everybody, like even just looking around the Zoom right now, there's 26 of us, and everybody's eyes are subtly different. You know, some people have larger eyes, some people have smaller eyes, big eyelashes, small eyelashes, different angles, different things like that. So it's really important that you just look at the person that you're drawing. Another technique or important tip that I can give you before we even start drawing this eye is that depending on how old the person you're drawing, that's going to affect how large or small you make their eyeball. Okay. So young kids, for example, I don't know if you guys knew this, but when you're born, your eye is fully grown. Okay. So as you grow, your eye stays the same size your whole life. Every other part of your body grows, right? When you're born, you have like tiny fingers and they get larger, right? So your eyes, though, when you're born, the reason it looks like babies have huge eyes is because their eyeballs are full size. And so the rest of your face is just smaller. So you have to remember that when you're drawing somebody, if you're going to draw a baby or a child, especially somebody under the age of like 3 or 4, they're going to look like they have really big eyes, when in actuality, they just have normal size eyes. And then if you're going to draw somebody older, like let's say you're going to draw somebody that's like your grandparents, like somebody that's like older than 65, they look like they have really, really small eyeballs. Their eyeballs are the same size, like the actual ball inside your head is the same size. But what happens is as you get older, your skin gets looser, and so your eye openings get smaller because your like eyelids start to sag a little bit, okay? So young people, big eyes, old people, small eyes, everybody else is kind of in the middle, okay? So when I'm drawing this too, if you look, the width of the eye is usually double the height. So if I were to take this space here and flip it on its side, it'll fit there twice. All right. So that's like a good technique when you're trying to figure out, is my eye opening large enough? This should be about half of this. All right. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw another circle. This circle will be your iris, the middle colored part of your eye. And so I'm going to draw a circle that touches, it's got to go past the top and past the bottom of the eye opening. And it should fill up about, actually a little bit more than a third. There should be a little bit of white on this side, a little bit of white on that side, but most of this is going to be iris. And when you're drawing this, I think the thing to remember, a lot of people do this. A lot of people, they'll make their eyeball with their iris here in the middle. And the reason that looks weird is because you can see white below and above the iris. Well, that's not actually really normal, okay? If we were to look around the Zoom, if we were normally in class, I would have you guys do this in person. But I'll just, again, I'll look at my camera really close for you guys. You can see my beautiful eyes up close. So if you look at somebody's eye, okay, the iris, the colored part of the eye, if I were to look down right now as low as I can, you cannot see the white above my iris. It's just not possible. Usually out of every 25 or so students, I have like one kid that can like push their eyes down low enough while keeping their eyelid up for you to even see that. So the only way you'll ever see the white above somebody's iris is if you're drawing like a super hyper extreme portrait or drawing of somebody in a weird position, okay? Yeah, like you have to physically pull your eyelid up usually to see your iris, okay? So that's one thing to remember. Now, if I were to look up at my ceiling right now without moving my head, you will see the whites underneath my eyes, underneath my irises. I imagine you can see them right now. And you guys could do the same. But what's important to remember is like, unless you're drawing somebody looking up at the ceiling like that, where they're moving just their eyes and not their whole head, you're not going to draw the whites underneath their irises, all right? So that's why it's important when you're drawing the second circle, make sure when you're drawing it that the bottom of it goes behind the eyelid and the top of it goes behind the top eyelid. All right, does that make sense to you guys? Yeah, cool. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more circle, and it's really important to make these things center. So like if you need to figure out where the center is, like put a dot there if you have to. It should be equal distance from both sides and from the top and bottom. So like that's the center of my eye. And I'm going to go ahead and make a circle around that. And I'm just going to make it kind of a medium-sized circle, like an average circle. This is the pupil of the eye. And your pupil is actually a hole, in a physical hole in your eye that allows light to pass through it. I'm sure you guys know that from science class. But as an artist, something you can remember is if you're drawing somebody outside, like if they're somewhere very light or bright or sunny, you can make that pupil smaller. It can be like a pinhole. It can be smaller than this. And if you're drawing someone somewhere dark, like if they're inside of a dark room or something like that, you can make the pupil much larger, okay? Because the way it works is your pupil gets smaller when it needs to let less light in. So if it's bright, you need less light. And if it's dark, you need more, so it gets larger. Usually when I'm drawing an eye, I kind of split the difference and go right in the middle. It's like an average pupil. If we were like hanging out in a classroom, this is probably what your eyes would look like. But those kind of subtle variations, they do make a difference if you're doing like a detailed drawing or painting. They make a difference about like what somebody would look like and how believable it is. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shade this pupil in a little bit. I'm not going to get too dark yet. We're going to get there in a minute. This will end up being the darkest part of our drawing when we're done. But I don't like to make anything super dark until we're ready to. That way you can still make corrections and changes if you need. All right, so I've added some value to the pupil. Now what I'm going to do is if you look at normally, if you look at a person's eye, I should probably pull up another picture of an eye. Maybe I will later. If you look at the edge of somebody's iris, the colored part of their eye, the very edges of it, okay, they are darker than the rest. So the edge of this iris, I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm going to make it really dark on each side. This will probably end up being the second darkest thing we draw. And that's true no matter what your eye color is. If you have blue eyes, brown eyes, hazel eyes, whatever, your iris is really dark around the outside edge. Let me know if I'm going too fast for you guys. I want to give you enough time to draw the things that I'm drawing too. All right. So our next step is we're going to draw, my camera will focus. There we go. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to add some of these fibers in. If the iris is made up of little pigments and fibers of tissue. And so if you look, they're all like little lines and they start in the center and they move out to the outsides. It's almost like drawing like a star, a starburst or something. I'm just drawing really light lines. And the darker somebody's eye, maybe the darker will make these. If you have like a light blue eye, maybe you wouldn't make them super dark. For now, I'm just gonna kind of add the value and we'll come back and darken everything up in a minute once we add all the pieces of the eye. Okay, so that's the next step. I don't know how many steps we're on now, but several. Okay. So now I want to start thinking about just the general structure of the eye, and we probably need to start thinking about adding some eyelashes. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add a tear duct here. So this is the corner of the eye. The reason I left this gap here is if you look in most people's eyes, there's a tear duct right here in the inside corner. And so it's just like a pink tissue that you see. And it's actually, you know, it's pretty sizable. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a little, like a jut right there where my tear duct is, okay? And now I'm gonna think about adding some eyelashes, all right? Let me go ahead and move on my page for a second to another spot. And I'll slide it up here. And I wanna show you guys something. For eyelashes, if we were to break this eye into 4 corners or 4 quadrants, right? Your eyelashes always grow out and up, all right? So they're always gonna do this. They're gonna move out from the eye and up like that. Out and down, out and down, out and up. So they curve away from the eye, right? That's really important to remember. And so the eye that we're drawing right now, this is a left eye. So if we were to put like a left eye here in the middle of this, okay, it's important to remember that the most of the eyelashes, you're like the part that has the most eyelashes is here. So this would be number 1. This would be number 2. There's still a lot of eyelashes on the inside edge of the top. And then on the outside edge of the bottom, there's a decent amount. On the inside edge on the bottom, there's a lot less. So it's like the most eyelashes all the way to the least, kind of like that. So that's important to remember. So let me go ahead and start adding some eyelashes to this person. You got to be careful when you're drawing eyelashes. It's important to remember that the more eyelashes you give somebody, the more feminine they look. So I actually have like very long eyelashes, and I think I would be hesitant to draw them super dark for a guy because you're going to make them feel more feminine than maybe you want to. So, but don't be afraid to actually add eyelashes to guys too. Like we all have them. So I'm gonna go ahead and start here in the outside corner, and I'm gonna put my eyelashes, they kind of grow down from the bottom of this eyelid. So usually the first thing I do is I darken up this line that makes the top eyelid, because a lot of times people's eyelashes, like they create this sense of value there. So I'm gonna darken that line up first. And then what I'm gonna do is starting in this corner, I'm gonna go ahead and draw some eyelashes coming out from it. Now, it's really important when you're doing this, you don't want to, like, people will keep an equal distance. Like, people will do this. I know this is a bad eye, but people will always do this. Like it's a sun or something, or like they're trying to do like the Illuminati all-seeing eye or some symbol. Like, okay, your eyelashes are not straight and your eyelashes are not equally distanced from one another. Okay, they're random, they're pieces of hair, they're follicles that come out. So when you're drawing them, it's important to just be a little bit random. When you're in the middle, it's going to look like they're straight and it's going to look like they're really short. They're not really short. You just got to remember that's foreshortening happening because they're coming directly at the viewer. So they're going to look a little bit shorter in the center, but they're not. So there's some eyelashes. I might add more in a minute. Even these are a little bit too straight. I'm going to add a couple looser ones. It's not too bad. And if you're drawing a woman or somebody that had, like, let's say this is a girl, somebody that's using mascara, you can go ahead and go in on some of them and make them darker or thicker. You know, some people have thicker eyelashes, some people have thinner eyelashes, so it's okay to like add some volume to them if you wanted to. All right, now the bottom eyelashes are a little bit different in that you have to remember that the bottom eyelashes, they come from the outside edge of your skin, okay? They're not growing from the inside of your eyelid, they're growing from the outside of your eyelid. And you can actually see if you look at somebody's eye really close, there's like thickness to your eyelid here, okay? So there's like a little bit of a ridge there. So in order to draw that or show that, what I do, I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I clean this up real quick first. What you do is you're gonna add a little tiny ridge or a line below the bottom of the eye that you already drew. Real close. Like you don't want to see much daylight in between those two lines. You want it to be real close together. But what you're showing is the thickness of your skin, like the actual thickness of your skin. Okay? And so when you draw these eyelashes, you're going to draw them from the outside of that, not the inside. They don't come across it. They just grow from the outside. And so these eyelashes, they get smaller and shorter as you get to the center. They actually do. You don't have very many here in the middle. We'll do a couple like here. And there's just the least amount of eyelashes is like right there on that side. Okay. So that's how you draw the bottom eyelashes. So see, there's nothing coming across that ledge. It's all on the outside of it. So now we're starting to build up a pretty decent looking eye. And the thing that we can start to do now, we're going to add an eyebrow in a minute, but first let's start to think about how would value affect this, okay? In class before, we've drawn spheres, and we've talked about how when you draw a sphere, you have to think about where's the light coming from, and wherever the light's coming from, it's going to be darker on the opposite side, right? We've talked about like core and crest shadow and highlights and things like that. Well, for people, if you're drawing a person, most of the time, I'm going to draw like a little profile face here so we kind of have an idea. So most of the time when you're drawing somebody, there's like, here's a forehead, there's a brow line, there's the eye socket and like a cheek. Usually like the nose comes down like this. So when you think about it, the light usually is coming from above us like this. Okay, whether we're inside and there's like lights inside the classroom or inside of a building, or whether we're outside and it's the sun, usually the light's coming from above. All right, so usually that means that this part of your eye is darker and the bottom part here where your cheek is, that's lighter because the light's hitting it. Do you see what I'm saying? So we know that, and we know that this is shaped like a sphere, so we know that it's going to be darker on top. So I'm going to go ahead and start adding some value here, just a little bit at first on both sides. And when I'm shading, remember, I'm using the side of my pencil a lot at first. I want to make sure that I have room to do some different things. And especially where the top of that sphere is, that's where like the top of your eyelid is. It's like right here, that crease, okay? And sitting right above that crease in a minute, it's going to be our eyebrow. So that's about it. And on the bottom, there's going to be some value too, because your eyeball comes out from your face a little bit. So there'll actually be some value here too, especially if you don't get as much sleep as I do. You're sleepy and you have baggy eyes. Okay. So that's why it was important to draw that circle. A lot of times when I'm done, I'll just erase the last remnants of that circle, but I used it to kind of tell me where to add value. Okay. Now, what's cool about that is you can use that same logic to figure out where the value is inside of the eye. So the corners of the eye here, that's going to be where it's super dark. It's going to be almost as dark as the pupil in there. So I'm going to go inside that corner, and I usually kind of shade in a circle like this. And as I get back onto that white of the eye, I kind of lighten my pressure and make sure that it kind of gradually fades from like dark here in this corner back to lighter here. You won't see very much of the eye that actually is white. People always think the whites of your eye are super white. Well, there's actually a lot of value going on there. Okay. It's just that they're reflective because they're moist. You actually like have moisture on the surface of your eye. And so because of that, you see a lot of reflections and bright spots too. And we'll talk about how to fix that or show that in a minute. But you usually see a lot of shadow too. So I start in my corners when I'm shading, make it dark and kind of gradually lighten it up as it gets to the center. I'll add a little bit of value to this tear duct too because it's kind of darker. All right. Let me know if I'm going too fast for you guys ever too. All right, and I'll slow down. All right. So since we're thinking about that, the top part of the eyelid is going to cast a shadow onto the eye itself. So I usually take my pencil and just a little beat below the eyelid, I'm going to go ahead and add some value across the entire eye because the eyelid itself is going to cast a shadow. And I really think that that helps it feel more three-dimensional when you add that. You can do a little bit of that at the bottom, like you can darken up that edge too, but it won't cast as strong a shadow as the top because the light's usually coming down at it. I'm going to darken up that ridge on the edges too, just a little bit. Because as it's closer to the sides, it'll catch some shadow too. All right, this is starting to come together. So now at this point, if you're happy with the way your eye looks or you're happy with it and you know that you're going to commit to some of these values, now's the time to go back in and like really darken up the pupil. So I'm going to use circular movements with my pencil. And this is just a regular, I'm not doing anything fancy. This is a regular HB pencil. It's a Ticonderoga, of course. The only brand of pencil you should be using. One day I'm gonna get my own YouTube channel and I'll say that every episode, and then maybe Ticonderoga will maybe they'll send me pencils. It'll be like an official sponsor. And then I'm gonna add some more darkness around the iris, the edge of that, like we talked about. And then I think this is kind of a trick too, is you want to go ahead and I'm going to darken some of these fibers in the iris, like I talked about the colored part of your eye. But when you do it, if you look, they're like they're almost like pointy at the bottoms. They like connect to your pupil a little bit. And so if you look at it, it almost like they like kind of starburst out of there or like shoot out of there almost. So I add like these little points around the pupil, and a lot of people don't draw that or you don't notice it unless you really closely examine somebody's eye. But they're there. I challenge you all to go look in a mirror after this tutorial is over later. And so I'm going to go ahead and I've got a pretty sharp pencil right now, and I'm going to go in and I'm just darkening up some of these fibers. And I kind of like to layer them on top of one another because that's kind of how they are in your eye. They're layered a little bit. Okay. I actually think I can even get darker with the pinpoint of my iris, so I'm gonna make that just a touch darker. Really, and I know that's contrarian to a lot of times I tell you guys not to outline things, but with the iris, that's really how they look if you were to get close. Okay. So now looking at that, I can see that my my eyelashes are not quite as dark as I want them to be. So now you can kind of punch up the value there too if you need to. So go and punch all this up. So yeah, when you're punching up value, just make sure I'm using like the tip of my pencil more instead of the side. I feel like I just made this a woman because I made her eyelashes pretty thick. That's okay. Wearing some mascara. How you guys doing so far? Anyone got any questions?
Are we gonna add highlight?
We are. That's actually the next thing we're going to do. Good question.
Okay.
And that's what will make this really come together, I think. All right, so now that it's got some value and it's shaded, what we're going to do is we are going to add that highlight. Now, when you're drawing that, a lot of times people think about like cartoons, and they draw, like people will draw an eye like this, and then they'll just draw a circle that's like looks like a crescent moon or something that has like a piece of it missing, right? That's not the way that's great for cartoon characters and things, and it's cool that you think about that stuff. But with a regular eye, what you want to do is think about where's your light source. And when you look at that, you can usually see it'll usually be on the top. And that's why the reflections are usually up here. But is it coming from the top and the left or the top and the right? So we're going to do it over here on the right this time. But just remember, you always have to look at your character or look at the person that you're drawing to determine that. And be consistent. If you put it on that side for one eye, it's got to be on the same side for the other eye, which will be opposite. Because otherwise you're going to make the person look like they're cross-eyed. Like if I put the reflection on the outside of the eye on one eye, it needs to be on the inside of the eye on the other eye, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by just using my eraser in a circular motion. I'm just going to kind of give myself a little bit of a flare there. And it doesn't take a lot for it to feel like a reflection. And what's nice is you can kind of still see some of your lines underneath it. And so that's truly really what that is what a reflection is in your eye, because you have a cornea that's just the clear covering of your eye. The part of your eye that's wet is covering the entire surface of your eye, even the pupil. And so you'll have the reflection will sit on the surface of your cornea. And a lot of times there'll be a little one. If there's one on the top, sometimes you'll catch a reflected light on the bottom too, on the opposite. So a lot of times I'll do like a little one down here in the bottom as well. Okay. And that can make it feel more realistic. Does that make sense to you guys? Awesome. All right, so now kind of like the finishing touch, I think, is to add an eyebrow to the eye. And eyebrows are tricky because they're a lot less, like they're structured a little bit differently for every person. Some people have like big caterpillar eyebrows like me. Some people have really tiny eyebrows. Most eyebrows, most of the time they extend from the corner of the eye to the other corner of the eye. They're going to be like just built around the same width as the eye. So I'm going to show you another little diagram up here, my little doodles. When you're looking at an eyebrow, they do this. They start by growing up and out, and they're short strands at first. And then as they get further along the eye, they get a little longer and they start to turn away from the top. They start to go sideways. So like over here, they'll be lots longer until eventually they grow down a little bit. Like that's kind of the motion of an eyebrow. And you've got to remember that that part is pretty consistent for every person. It's like the follicles actually move up and then out. Because they're growing, if you remember this person here, they start here, so they kind of follow the nose line up and down and around like that, all right? So when we're drawing this person's eyebrow, we've got to keep that in mind. The other thing you want to keep in mind is if people are always like, well, how high up do I make the eyebrow? Like, where do I put it on the face? Usually your eyebrow is an eye's height above the eye. So if this eye is this wide, this eyebrow is going to sit like right here. It's going to be like the size of the eye above it. Does that make sense? All right, that's like a helpful trick. And if you look around the Zoom right now at most people, if you look at their eyes, their eyebrow is like, you can put their eye above their eyebrow, or above the eye above the eye, and then there's the eyebrow. You get that double width, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start the eyebrow here. I'm gonna keep that width about the same all the way across, and we'll end the eyebrow around here. So I know, like, I kind of put 3 little points, so I know what my arch is gonna look like. Some people's eyebrows go further into the center or further to the side. It just depends. Just look at your person. And I'm going to go ahead and give this person pretty big eyebrows, and then we'll trim them back, okay? Because a lot of people do like wax or, I don't know, manicure their eyebrows so they look nice, especially ladies. But I'm going to show you there's a way to do that. Instead of drawing an eyebrow like this, a lot of people will like actually draw a box and be like, here's an eyebrow, and then they'll shade the box in like that, but that ends up looking fake or cartoony. All right, the way you draw a real eyebrow is you start here, that same distance up. I'm going to go ahead and start by adding some hair, and when I'm doing this, I kind of move my pencil in different directions, because eyebrows are not consistent. It's not like people don't usually comb or brush their eyebrows. I guess some people do, but I clearly don't. And so when I'm doing it, you want to do random bits of hair. And I start real light because like everything else, you can always go back and darken it up, but it's a lot harder to get rid of dark values. So now I'm going to start to curve it. There's like the peak of the eyebrow is going to end up being right there. And these hairs on this end are longer. And here at the beginning, bless you, whoever, that was a big sneeze. And here in the middle, they're kind of in the middle. And it's important to like draw some of these flyaways and random hairs so that it feels like a natural progression. And I usually draw a couple really short ones here at the edge. Okay, does that make sense? So I think that's what makes it feel believable when it's kind of random and it kind of matches the way somebody's hair naturally grows. And then usually what I'll go in and do is I'll just add like a layer of darker strands and just kind of layer it together, because that's really what an eyebrow does. And on the top, I'll leave it a little bit lighter, and it's more about the way that the light's hitting it. Even if you have dark eyebrows like mine, you're going to catch some more light on the top than you would the bottom. I'll give this person Anthony Davis eyebrows. Should I do that? Like Frida Kahlo. All right, so that's kind of, this guy's got, I feel like this eyebrow looks very, this person's evil. They have like Count Count Dracula eyebrows or something. So if you wanted to like touch this up so that the eyebrow didn't have so many like flyaways, or so that it was like a more manicured or trimmed eyebrow, the way you would do that is then you would just take your eraser and shape it, right? Because that's what you're doing when you shape your eyebrow. Like these people that wax their eyebrows, they're putting what, wax or tape or whatever on it. And so if you wanted to shape it, that's how you do it. Shape it with your eraser. It's basically mimicking what somebody does to their eyebrow, right? So if you wanted to shape it in the end, that's how I do it. Okay, so see? And so now that I have that down, I can really start to commit some value before we finish it up. So what I'll do is I'll add some more value where that eyelid is. I'm gonna go in and like darken the eyelid up. And then we talked about the way that the light hits on the edge of the face. So this area below the eyebrow and above the eye itself right here, that's a lot darker, a lot darker. So I'm gonna go ahead and start adding some value there too. And as you see, like when the eyelid separates and starts to come back out towards the eye, like this bottom part of the eyelid, that's going to be a little bit lighter as it gets closer to the eye because it's starting to break away and out of the shadow. Going to commit some more value here to like where the bridge of the nose would be. And now looking at that, I can say, oh, I got to darken up my eyebrow a little bit more. So I'm going to use the tip of my pencil a little bit more. And just kind of go in and work that eyebrow a little bit. Make it feel more natural and darker. Especially right here on the edge and here. Really now all I'm doing at this point is I'm going around and just working up any value that I see that's lacking. Like anywhere where I think I can punch the contrast of a drawing up. And this is like, this isn't just an eye. This is like any drawing you're doing. Like I always kind of do this last step where I go in and I say, all right, where are my values not dark enough? Where are where can they get darker? Like right here could be a little darker. All right, and that, I think for now, that is how you draw an eye. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about it or anything that you think you want any tips or pointers on? Okay, so what I want you guys to do, I want to practice this. All right, so we've got a little bit more time in class. And so what I would like for you guys to do is find a blank area on your page. And I want you to try to draw a set of eyes. Try to draw 2 eyes and 2 eyebrows together, okay? What you need to remember is when you're drawing 2 eyes, okay, so if I want to draw a set of eyes, say it was down here and I was drawing a set of eyes, the thing that you need to remember is that the distance in the middle of the eyes, so if I was going to draw 2 eyes here, let me draw this person's eye opening. It's like, okay, well, how do I start the other eye, Mr. Donoghue? Where do I go from there? Where do I put it? Well, it's usually an eye's length in between those 2 eyes, almost exactly. So if you just figure out what is the size you used here, well, that's the size that's going to be in between them. and then the other eye will be equal on the other side. And so that's set it up. Like take your time to make sure that your drawing is about the same size, that it's equal, and that the space here is about the same. Okay, and it's okay to like tweak it back and forth a little bit. When you guys were doing your grid drawings in the beginning of the semester, I think that was something that a lot of people had to work on, was making sure that your placement is equal. All right, so try to keep that distance there the same as the two sides. All right. So that's what we're going to work on the rest of the class. At the very end of class, we'll all kind of hold them up and see how we do. All right.